The 5908 Outlook demolition. John, what do you know about that?
5908 Outlook, or the former Harley-Woods building, was purchased by the city back in 2005 as part of the property acquisition for the FEMA floodplain because of the revisions. What we did is in February, we solicited bids for demolition of that structure, with Midland Wrecking being the lowest bidder at $33,755.
That's all you know.
Very straightforward.
Questions to John about that?
No, glad the day has arrived, I recommend.
So I would just, I have 2 cents to say. I mean, I think we all have been wanting this to happen for a really long time. I think it's very unfortunate that this is, granted it's $33,000 and not $68,000, but it's just, to me, a little disappointing that we weren't thinking about putting this in the budget. Like, why didn't we have this in the 2016 budget? I mean, if we kind of had planned this to the point that we were going to put out a request to, get bids on it, and here we are in April, why wasn't this a part of the budget? It just...
Well, you asked us to go solicit bids, but you didn't give us specific direction at that time that you knew that you specifically wanted it demolished. You wanted to look at what the costs were and then compare that, I think, to some other things was our impression. And I think our intent was we knew that it could come out of fund balance if the bids came back and you decided to proceed down that path of demolition.
Mm-hmm. So if we didn't have these restructured IRBs, would there have been funds for it? It just feels a little bit like, hey, we got some money, let's spend it. And I know that's not the intent, and I want the community to know that that's not the intent, but that's kind of how it feels.
Typically when you have an expense like this that comes up and it's unbudgeted, your options are, you go to an unidentified revenue source that you may have, or a revenue stream that's performing better, or you go to your fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from our perspective too, even with the Neff property when it got demolished, we have a hard time really putting a number to that, just because of the intricacies in the different buildings, what they're made of, how they're constructed. Like this one is attached to the building to the north, so there's going to have to be some precision in taking that apart, and it's hard to put a number to that. And I think when we solicited the bids, I in my mind, I fully didn't expect for those numbers to be
As low as they are.
as low as they
I
are.
wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I was very surprised.
So,
So it feels doable.
Mhm.
That low.
Well, hopefully like your point, I understand your points, and hopefully like the Neff building, depending upon what happens with this property, there may be ways for us to recover this demolition costs, similar to Neff, depending upon the kind of development that goes in there, and it can be part of purchase price or development fees or something of that nature. So while we'll be out the money in the short term, there may be a way to recover.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah, very good. Who else? Nothing?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for asking.
Did you say you recommended that, Dale?
I did.
Anybody else?
I'll second it.
Second. I think that's,
I would not recommend.
yeah, not on the consent. Next
But
item.
let me just
Yes.
interrupt here though. With that though, would you like us to sort of put it out to market at this point? I think our options have been, as we've talked about it in the past, let's see and what interest there may be in terms of redevelopment, which I think staff would recommend we at least go down that path and look and see what interest we have, knowing that we also may want to, depending on what that is, consider holding it for additional parking for the downtown
Yes, I
district.
think that's.
We have been contacted by people over the years, and in fact, just in the last couple of weeks, by somebody who was interested in the property with the building down. Over the last probably 5 or 6 years, people have wanted to reuse the building, and it just wasn't feasible.
Right.
So we can certainly put together an RFP and get that out on the market and look at what options we might have for future development.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
And I think the one thing, and I understand about the parking and that the downtown visioning committee, suggested additional parking. Something that I would be interested, well, since I'm leaving, but I would encourage the council maybe to be interested in is And again, I'm not about spending money on studies, but understanding what is the real need we have for parking. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, as I drive down Johnson Drive, except for maybe certain blocks at certain times during the day, it doesn't necessarily see that we have an over shortage of parking. And even with the Mission Flower and Farm Market, I really think that for the short period of time, while it might be kind of a pain in the rear for some of the surrounding businesses and residents, there are places for people to park and be able to get to the farm market. So I would just encourage us to really be thoughtful about, is parking the right, is it really needed, is it the right thing versus a revenue generating option. That's all I have to say.
Anybody else? John, how about the traffic signal analysis for Markway and Broadway?
Absolutely. In 2013, we installed the traffic signal in Markway and Broadmoor as part of the Markway project. Originally, that intersection had been a four-way stop for a long period of time. Since we've installed the traffic signal, we have had complaints about the left turn as you head southbound Broadmoor to go eastbound Markway. At peak times, that movement backs up because of the traffic heading north and south at Broadmoor. At that time, when we installed the signal, there was not a warrant for a protected left turn for that movement. With everything that's gone on there, the development there, the Wellstone going in, things of that nature, we want to go back and look at that again to see if that movement's now warranted. And that's what this study will tell us, if that protected left turn would be warranted.
And what's the occupancy rate at the
Wellstone.
facility at Wellstone? Is it like 50% occupied, 60%, 30%?
I think they're probably closer to 30% right now when we spoke with them last. So that would be a question, do we want to wait till they're at a higher occupancy?
Right, I mean, do we feel, believe me, I actually witnessed it, I had never understood what Susie would bring to the council because I never saw it, but I went through one and nobody got to turn left at all.
Yeah. Do we need to do a
study.
$7,000 study to figure this out? It seems like it's kind of obvious.
I know that it sounds like overkill, but when it comes to traffic signals, warrants are a big thing. I know as part of the Markway project, they were talking about it, this particular movement even then. And with the federal funds that were on that job, they require you to do a traffic signal warrant analysis. And those warrants basically dictate how those signals are set up. And if you have an unwarranted signal or unwarranted movement, it kind of opens you up to the potential liability.
Oh, no good, no
Yeah.
good.
So,
Well,
That's one
that
of the
being
only
the case,
signals at a crossing such as that between all of them that doesn't have that signal, isn't it, in the whole city?
yeah, I mean, you get to some signals like Barkley, Barkley heading south,
Right.
coming out of Hy-Vee and stuff like that. It doesn't have a protected left. Northbound Barkley at Johnson Drive, I don't believe it has a protected left. So I mean, there's some that don't. But from our view, we want to make sure that whatever we do is warranted.
And I guess I would just be concerned to spend $7,000 and it's just barely not warranted, you know what I mean?
yeah, which is why you want to wait until.
Right, at least 50%
It's
occupancy.
not a bad idea,
I don't
yeah.
know. I mean,
We can authorize it and then hold off until they
It's just
increase
barely
their
not
occupancy.
you know what I mean? Like I lost by 1 point, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe the
Well,
Villanova
you just had a
or
few more
They need to do
arrests.
Tar
that, they
Heels,
need to do
you know,
that study
kinda.
on April 15th with everybody coming from the post
Yeah,
office.
yeah.
With the stop signs that used to be, it was
Oh,
blocks
crazy.
lined up.
Crazy.
I mean, I get the people that are, it's frustrating for sure. I mean, but don't get me wrong, it's no more frustrating than Broadmoor and Johnson Drive.
And you just avoid it if it's too frustrating until you fix it. If you do get warranted, do you get any federal funds or anything?
No,
Or
but
not just traffic?
you adding the movement to the signal.
It's not
Is-
it's not an outrageous expense?
We're talking $2,000 or $3,000 total.
Warrants more expensive.
So,
I mean,
So we're recommending to hold off on this until,
We can
I'll
certainly.
do it.
We can certainly do that to the occupancy of
No, I will.
at least 50.
Well, my opinion is, I think it warrants it now, and I think that's what the warrant would say. I'm no traffic engineer, but
Probably.
why don't we bring it up to the Olson if, Wellstone being at 30% versus 50% would have a material impact, and if they say no, then I think our suspicion will be confirmed that it probably already warrants it, we've all experienced it. I'll also say, you mentioned Susie earlier, I talked with her, she says hello, she's recuperating, and as you might suspect, she is enthusiastically behind the study, so I would encourage us to move forward and have that conversation with Olson, and if they say, yeah, it's a great point, it may skew it, and you'd have to do it a second time, then obviously, we can hold back, but
So postpone until we get a response back.
let's ask Olson their professional opinion.
Absolutely. Right, we can do that before.
I think that's a great idea.
2 weeks. Yep.
And we also could find out how soon they expect to be 50% occupied. I thought there were people waiting in line.
Yeah, I thought it was like 70+%. I'm surprised too. So.
That's what they said.
I'm like, did I make that up?
No, I think they said that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this is just the material.
Then we,
It's 70% of something occupied.
Can I deviate just for a
Parking
second?
lot. Yeah.
To bring up this thing that I bring up probably every other meeting, and I apologize because I know I sound like a broken record. What needs to be done to replace that traffic signal at Johnson Drive and Broadmoor on the corner where the jewelry store is?
Two cans of
Well, that was a perfect, that was a perfect segue,
Yeah.
actually,
Horrible.
because
It's
I know we've
horrible.
heard about Broadmoor and Johnson Drive, and we've heard about Barclay and Johnson Drive,
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna
Are
let
you talking
John.
about the streetlights?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Stoplights, traffic
So
signals.
I'm gonna let John update you on kind of, we own one, KCP&L owns the other, so it's two different contractors that have had to come out and evaluate, but let him give you an update on kind of the status of
You got that
those.
info?
sure.
The timing and then the ugliness.
Um,
kind of forward to it. But I know that's what,
it's kind of twofold. And basically, both, like Laura said, the one signal is owned by us, Johnson
Which
Drive
one?
and Broadmoor. Johnson Drive and Barclay is owned, operated, and maintained by Kansas City Fire and Light. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Both signals are on loop detection. So what loop detection means is there are loops in the pavement. So when a car pulls up to a traffic signal, the pressure of the car sets on those loops, and that's what tells the traffic signal, hey, there's a car sitting here waiting for this movement.
Then there's something broken.
Right.
Because that's not how it operates.
And I will address I'll go with the Barclay signal first. With all the construction that was going on with Cornerstone, and Google Fiber had a shot that they had to put at Barclay and Johnson on the east side, some of those loops were damaged. When those loops are damaged, the traffic signal controller basically goes right into recall.
Yep.
Recall is when each phase gets a certain amount of time to go through the signal. So instead of it detecting someone pulling up, it is going through every phase, every time.
Yep.
And it could be noon, it could be 4 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
It's gonna sit there and go through every phase on a certain interval. So that was the problem with that signal. KCP&L's been out, they've got the pedestrian signals all squared away on that signal, and they've got the loops fixed. I was out there watching it today, and it seems to be operating as it should.
So that's Barclay.
So that's
At
Barclay.
McDonald's.
Broadmoor, a little bit more grim news. Total Electric is our traffic signal maintenance contract. With the new contract that we just signed with them, it requires them to give us monthly reports on the conditions of all of our traffic signals that we own. The last report that they sent me for Johnson Drive and Broadmoor stated that all the loops in the signal are bad. The wiring in the cabinet is bad.
I don't like the light pole.
God, the pole is just disgusting. I mean, it's
And
really all
Spray
over.
paint did.
I'll
and-
paint it. Give me the paint, I'll paint it. It's
Well,
awful.
the problem is basically that entire traffic signal has outlived its useful life.
Needs to be replaced.
You know, you look at different options. You can try to go and replace all the loops and redo the cabinet and, you know, do some of those things. By that time, you've just sunk a lot of money into
Might as well just redo that
old
for a Johnson
dilapidated
Drive.
signal.
Who is you?
Us.
The
Us.
city.
That's the one owned by KCP&L?
No,
This one's owned by
Broadmoor
us.
and Johnson is ours.
Oh, that's ours.
We own that one.
Oh, good.
So we've gone and invested a lot of money in a signal that is, for lack of a better term, it's old. And it's just kind of lived its life. So,
Are there any kind of safety grants out there that we could look into applying for? Because that's a safety issue, correct?
I would say that it is a safety issue for sure.
John Gerber said it is.
We can look at that, but I think our
But-
plan is to bring it back in the 2017 budget. We're gonna have to talk about replacement of that signal immediately,
Yeah.
and then building kind of a
What-
plan.
What's it mean here?
Well,
Well,
it'll be
as
until
quickly as we
2018,
can.
I mean,
Okay.
right?
Well, it could be as early as 2017.
The end of 2017, right?
I
Because your
mean-
budget doesn't get passed until August.
Or 2016.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And at this point now,
Oh, yeah.
we have talked to Total and said, you know, we have to make this signal operate in a fashion that it is safe. And right now, it is on detection, it's not on detection, it's on recall. So basically, it's gonna go through every phase, every time that signal cycles. And there will be times where you'll be sitting there and it's not gonna change until it makes it
But it's
all the way
still
through.
safe, as
But
long as
it,
it's on recall.
exactly. Trying to, I mean,
Mhm.
to get it back on detection
That probably would not be a good idea at this point.
would almost, it would not be a good idea. So understandably, it doesn't operate as efficiently as it should, but it's operating.
Have you ever gotten a cost on what it would take for a replacement?
Just as a comparison, the traffic signal at Johnson Drive and Lamar,
Mhm.
which is similar to the setup of the one down at Johnson and Broadmoor, was in the $180,000 range.
It's worth it. It's worth every penny.
Put stop signs back there.
So, I mean,
You'll see that.
that's kind of the comparison of,
And a look as we go through the budget in 17 of the age and condition of the other signals that are owned by us, so that we can start building or planning for anticipated useful life of those and building. those back up.
How do we come to the
CIP.
point where we own some and somebody else owns some? How do we get to that?
Just like our streetlights, right?
well, with our streetlights, we purchased all of our
But
streetlights.
before
There
we
was
didn't, right? Since I've been on council, we've
Right.
changed that.
So percentage-wise, about in the city, percentage-wise, how many do we own and what's the percentage that someone else owns of traffic
We
signalization?
probably own 30%. The good thing is a lot of the ones that we own have been updated. Null and Shawnee Mission Parkway was updated with the Null
Right.
project. Markway and Null's been updated, Johnson Drive and Null's been updated.
That's what they're Mark Lane.
What's their useful
What?
life?
Or, not Lamar.
Since you brought it up, Markway and Null, the timing as you're going south on Null,
That's horrible.
when you come to Johnson Drive, you stop, wait for the light. When you get the green and you go 70 yards to Markway, that's about the time that one turns red.
It's the
Right.
same going north too.
Is it?
So those two
Then the
signals,
timing's well,
yeah, those two signals aren't coordinated with each other.
I noticed.
And basically what that requires is for conduit to be run between the two, so the two signal controllers can talk.
We should have thought about that when we got on that
Ain't
area.
any way to just change the timing on the Markway light or something?
Make it detection?
They're both detection.
Oh.
They just, you've got one controller controlling one,
Right.
one controlling the other one, and they don't talk to one another. So, I mean, that's like on Shine Mission Parkway, Operation Greenlight. Those
They're all
signals,
talking.
those signals are coordinated for that
We're all
corridor.
talking.
So they're all having traffic move in conjunction with each other.
Was that just a boo-boo?
Not necessarily. I mean, just,
It was just an oversight, not a boo-boo, but obviously it was an
So
oversight.
is that something that can be done wirelessly now?
we can look into that.
No,
I mean,
seriously.
and a lot of the Operation Greenlight signals act that, well, I mean, they're set up that way. So,
Is it cheaper to get KCP&L to take over a light, buy it from them? and- No, so it'd be best if we replaced it at home. And what's
Well,
the life
potentially, I mean, the
like?
thing that we will re-look at is at the same time, we looked at purchase and acquisition of the streetlight system. And we brought that forward and kind of showed you how quickly we can kind of recover and have some savings. We were talking about acquisition of the stoplights at the same time. And so it will be appropriate for us to sort of revive that and look at that again so we can do the cost benefit analysis, whether it makes more sense for us to continue to pay lease payments to KCP&L or whether there's some benefit similar to the streetlights where if we were to go out and purchase those, that we could recognize some savings for that. So we'll look at that again.
And how long is their useful life anticipated?
Wow.
A while, a long while, huh?
I mean,
When was the last time that Broadmoor and Johnson Drive was replaced?
The city was down.
So I would be interested,
Cows crossed.
I mean, I would say
It's been since.
This is always on a
conservatively,
flashing yellow.
and you could probably make it last longer, but 30 years.
Oh, okay.
I'd be interested in seeing if that's feasible to coordinate
Coordinating
those
those
two
two.
lights, yeah, with some
So-
kind of wireless signal, so it wouldn't cost you digging up and changing everything and running wires.
Sure.
But it'd work nice.
So if those two can be coordinated potentially
Mm-hmm.
wirelessly, could that be the same solution for the Broadmoor one to coordinate those to talk to each other better? So the old one is at least operating better than it does now without until it gets a full replacement.
We'd have to look into that too, because, you know, you've got a KCP&L signal and you've got a city owned signal.
Maybe we're just trying to see if we
I
can
mean,
sync them up.
I don't know that there would be any issue there, but, you know, it's always an option we can look into.
That particular signal runs on Thomas Edison DC current.
Oh, gotcha. We'll go find an old adapter. There's a hardware store downtown, we might have one still.
There's a couple, yeah.
Okay, so we know what we're doing there. John, thanks, man.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John.
Right.
We're gonna have Christie come up and talk to us here about the park at Mission Crossing.
Actually, you wanted to get me because Christy is home with a
She's
flu
out behind you?
and she's contagious and I asked her to not come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have my picture out.
So, yes, I think maybe she will get hers next year. So the park at Mission Crossing, as you all know, when you approved the development at Mission Crossing, the developer set aside $100,000 and donated the land at that corner to eventually be constructed as a new park for the city of Mission. So we have gone through a design process, and last year you all approved the conceptual design of the park. And we were ready to go to bid last year, and the Wellstone project was behind on their construction schedule. So we did not move forward then. In fact, we extended an easement agreement and got about another $3,600 out of the developer at the time to extend that easement. They are finished. They have moved things off the site, and so we are now ready to move forward to construct the park. So we took that out to bid. We did actually receive 7 proposals, and all 7 exceeded the architect's estimate and the project budget. The low bid was over by about 30%. The high bid was almost 100% over the architect's estimate. We went through those with a fine-tooth comb, and in fact, I sat down again with the architect earlier this week to try to get a clear understanding of how and why that happened. Don't have a great answer for that. If we look at the bids really across all 7 bidders, there didn't seem to be 1 or 2 particular items that caused the bust. in that bid price. So we set about the task then of looking to stay within the city's budget and what options did we have. You authorized a total budget, including design, of $127,000 roughly last year. So what we did is we were able to actually go back and adjust, look at the shade structure. So you may recall last year, that was one of the things that was important for you all to add into at the original time of construction for the project. So we were able to find an alternate provider for the shade structure that changed the shape only. So it is going from a kite shape to a square shape, and it saves us about $5,255. Does not change the quality or performance or really the look and feel and the shape of the sail on that shade structure. The other thing that we did in order to get this within budget at the time is, as we talked about it, there were 11 trees that were spec'd, and that's why I passed this around some of you. It's been a while since we looked at the design of the park. So it's essentially grass, trees, plaza with shade in the center, sidewalks and benches. So very passive park. There were 11 trees. We actually increased the caliper size of the trees when we went out to bid, thinking that if we could get a 5-inch caliper tree that was a little more established. And that was really double the architect's estimate on the tree prices. So what we've done is we've pulled the trees at this point out. When we construct the park, hopefully starting in June and July, that is not the time to plant trees anyway. You may remember that the tree board and the park board, as they originally talked about the name for this park, Celebration Park, one of the things that they tied to that was a celebration tree program, whereby you would give residents or businesses the opportunity to purchase a tree and dedicate it in honor of a loved one in that park, or in celebration of an anniversary or a birth or something. So our plan is, we've removed the trees at this time, and we're going to still roll out that celebration tree program and see if we can get the trees added back into the park through that donation program, both in this park and other places. The project budget at this point also does include a 5% construction contingency, and there's a little bit of excess, about $2,000. So I think through that combination of the celebration tree program and hopefully some savings as we get into construction of the project, we will.
How much were the trees?
$2,000 apiece.
If you look at
$2,000
for you?
$2,000 apiece.
Yeah, and I thought that was like, what kind of tree are we buying there?
It's trees and planting,
Yeah.
so that when we went to the increased
Maybe we
size.
could all just plant it. Let's just have a planting
Yeah,
party.
you and I'll put them in the back of the truck.
Well, no, I'm just thinking, I know
Tobacco.
Johnson County, they have trees that they're pulling out, moving, doing stuff to all the time, and sometimes they're looking for people that want the trees rather than just cut them down and do away with them. And I had one put in my front yard. I had no tree there until just a few years ago, and now that thing is huge.
And that's why we selected the trees. The trees is an easy thing
Cost
to
me
pull out
$100,
and
so.
look at, and we have a lot of other options. The other thing we can do is certainly bid the planting from a nursery or a standalone tree company. So our thought was, let's don't hold over trees. Let's don't hold up the construction of this project any longer, because I think we have several alternatives to figure out how to get the trees into the park. And so that's the piece that we pulled out at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what all this construction is and how big these things are, the shade things that you're putting up stuff, but once they're all in place, it may not be that easy to go in there and put in large caliper trees.
What kind of tree did you get for your front yard?
It's a maple.
Is it? Oh, it's not an
Soft or hard?
It's hard. Aren't maples hard?
No, they're
No,
soft
you
and
can
hard.
have both.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming hard, but
It's weathered everything pretty well.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking that there you are, the county's got them. There's a guy that lives in our city here, Mission, that he's now retired from Johnson County, but that was his job. He was kind of in charge of all those. Kevin Smith.
So they have an inventory of trees?
They did at that time. I'll have to talk to him.
Although they're in sprawl, trying to save them.
You know something, Pat, we might talk to the tree board and see if they can call Johnson County.
Yeah, we can put the tree board.
On the trees?
No, we'll just call it Johnson County.
I do like this. I like the tree program too.
thank you, Laura, for looking and
Yeah, no,
finding that
yeah.
in savings. I'd like to get on with the circuit.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no, on that bid where the
Yes,
ashtrays in there.
the cigarette receptacles were removed from the bid. They're
We
showing
talked-
on
wanted to
this
make sure
map,
they
I'm
were-
sorry, yes, this map is old, and then we
Yeah.
did not pay to have the map
No, no, good,
revised.
I'm good with that.
So you
as
can
well.
put an X through where it says cigarette receptacles on here, because they were not included in the bid.
Notice it says not for construction. So,
So there will just be cigarette butts all over the place. Very nice. Well, give me something to do on the weekends, I can go there.
Well,
The other thing that I would touch on there is that we did do a bid alternate here because the developer at Wellstone was supposed to put some sidewalk in on the north side of the project, and it hasn't happened, so we're working with them. We're working through the process of issuing their certificate of occupancy. That's one of the outstanding issues. So they will either put it in, we've given them the opportunity to pay us, and we'll do it as a part of this project as well.
But like, why won't they do it? Are they not like willing to do it? Are they just like, oops, sorry, we forgot that, we'll get right on it? Or
I think
like,
they were hoping we might forget about it, and we haven't, so,
Yeah, as we shouldn't.
exactly. So
You
what the
said
sidewalk-
on the north side of the
Yes.
park?
On the north side of the Wellstone project,
Oh,
which
on
would be
the
the
south
south side of the park.
Yeah, okay.
well, Lane Four has been great to work with on this project. And if you like the form-based code, you can thank that for Gould Park. So, Patrick, you're always looking for something positive to say about the form-based
I
code.
love that.
This Pocket Park is a direct result of that. I think the bid and the plan, holding the trees back, I think it looks great, and I'm ready to move forward with it.
How about the rest of y'all?
Second. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something we do,
Depends, you
Consent
generally
on-
don't put an item at this cost level, your practice has been not to put it on consent.
yeah,
It's not the cost as much as you wanted to bring it to people's
Just
attention.
let them know.
Yeah, it's good to talk about it a little bit.
If you read the PD Post, I guarantee you they'll make tomorrow
what's that?
That's cool.
about our park.
Oh, yeah.
That'll
All right. Since Christie's not here, we won't say goodbye. Stormwater DMP cost sharing program, the interlocal agreement.
By Glenn.
Hello, hello.
be Glenn.
How's everybody doing?
Welcome.
Very well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
A
very,
Alabama rig is what I was using today, if you were wondering.
is that the one with the multiple little things
Yes.
and the track?
Oh, they were hitting it, dude.
Never used one, but
I
I've
didn't either,
years.
the first time. They tore it up.
Anytime you got something new in there, they just go right at it, right? You can talk fishing later.
I knew you
later.
wanted to know.
So Danielle's not here to present this item to you, very brief. Each year, we bring forward an interlocal agreement for the county's stormwater best management practices program. Basically helps Mission residents do a few things to their personal residential property, gives them up to 50% of the cost back. So rain gardens, rain barrels, trees, plantings, things of that nature. We don't actually invest any money in it. We have to spend a little bit of time on the applications, the interview, an annual report if anyone builds a project. But it's a very simple way to give our residents an additional option to kind of improve their property, improve what's going on there. So we have an allotment of up to $3,000 to spend. We're hopeful that we'll get some applicants this year, and we would recommend that you approve the interlocal agreement.
We've been doing this for a long time, haven't
3 years.
3 years.
we? 3 years?
How many applicants do we have?
One.
One in the history of the program, the rain garden.
What do we do with the money if we don't spend it?
If it doesn't get given out, we don't get it. So it's just a pass-through grant. We let out the money up front, the county pays us on the back.
And then are we gonna do anything to kind of, promote this for the Emerald Ash Borer and let people know, hey, by the way, you need to get rid of that and we'll help pay? Or-
So in years past, we've put this into the newsletters, some of our other communication pieces with the public, as well as recommending it to people who come in from Mission Possible and the other assistance programs. Here, as we're starting to get into Emerald Ash Borer, our communications about that will include this project too.
As they take it, purposes.
Take it.
Good job.
Thank you,
Nice.
Glenn.
Pithy, I like that.
That takes us to the discussion items. We're going to call John back up here to talk to us about the 2016 street program, which we have talked about.
And we will continue.
It's a talk about.
Just getting started.
So, I want to preface by, if I start going too fast, I kind of nerd out on this stuff. So if I start going too fast, tell me to slow down. If you have any questions, please stop me. As you all know, our annual street program started back in 2011. Since we've implemented that program, we have touched approximately 37 lane miles worth of residential streets. So that does not include your Rose, your Johnson Drive, your Knolls, your Martways.
And what's the total number of what miles we have?
Total in the city, 110.
Not counting the big streets that you just named.
Now, that's
It includes that.
Okay,
So
well,
110 lane miles total.
so we replaced or worked on 37 miles of the ones not counting those big ones that you named.
Correct. How many-
Residential, is that
What
you're talking
percentage of those residential
It's 37.
streets is 37 miles? I think that's what we were trying to get.
That's
at.
where I was going, but it's.
I'd have to do some math. That's,
Oh, well, I don't want you to do that.
so, it's a little late.
Your math is, you're really uncomfortable with that, right?
That's right.
But these are the streets
I mean, you
that
think this
need
is-
to be done that we haven't, that we weren't counting on.
Right, these are the ones kind of contained in that residential program. So not the cars routes, not those kinds of projects that we've.
These are the ones we're trying to figure out how to budget.
Correct. So, in 2016, as we're putting together the program, there were a few items that I wanted to bring up tonight. The first is we have spoke to Cartograph, which is our work order asset management program that we've been using down at Public Works. We spoke to Cartograph about doing a street infrastructure inventory and condition update. So what that would do would inventory streets, curbs, and assign them a condition.
Sidewalks?
I
And
thought we were
sidewalks.
doing that
Yeah, I
already.
thought we were too.
No,
We're just
We
seeing.
talked about doing that.
We had a
We-
street inventory
correct.
in 2000,
We
8.
did every 3 years, right?
and then we did
And then
a
we did the-
PCI, which was just the surface, so look at the surface of the pavement.
Correct.
This is gonna be a
And then we did
camera.
a core,
Yeah,
And
what
we
was
did
the
core
core
sample, and then we did a
Geotechnical
geotechnical
analysis.
analysis.
geotechnical, that.
Didn't that tell us though that it needed total reconstruction?
That's what that tells us, yes. PCI is another tool in the toolbox. Basically what that does is tells you the condition of the street on the surface.
Okay.
The last time that we did that was 2008.
And so
we're-
what does that tell us
Yeah,
on top
what's-
of everything else we've done? Like,
It basically gives you the condition of the street on top. The geotechnical work gives you we do.
Doesn't the council bus ride around the city kind of tell you that?
That helps. But basically what this does is this gives us a complete inventory and condition rating of every street that we have in town.
Right.
So what that does,
And we've done this before.
Well, and we did, and so in 2008, we got the PCI rating on every street, and that's part of what we used to put together originally to say,
initial
in
program.
year one, these are the streets, so we set a goal, we want every street, when we get through our street maintenance program, to have a PCI index of 70 or higher, right?
correct.
And so we started with the worst streets, and that's how we built the streets into the program, was based on the PCI index. We haven't
First time.
upped that first time around.
okay, and then the geothermal said, whoa, wait a minute, you guys,
So
That basically took it a step further
It's geotech.
and said,
geothermal.
now that you've assigned this type of surface treatment for this street,
Right,
can you actually do it now? And the reason
that was
we-
the geotechnical,
correct.
got it,
And the reason that we had to do that was is we ran into some
right.
streets in 2011 where we milled off 2
Right.
inches of asphalt
And it's like,
and there
no.
wasn't anything left.
Right.
Did we finish the PCI from 2008?
Yes.
Complete that one?
Yes.
No, we have not touched every street that we inventoried in 2008.
Now, are you asking, have we touched every street or did we assign a
Did we do all the
condition?
work that we already signed the condition that we needed to?
No.
So why do we need to go ahead and do that again before we've completed the
Best
PCI
practice,
from-
To know where you're at.
best practice is to update that every 5 to 8 years. Because as time goes on, your streets keep degrading.
So you're just taking it a step further even though we haven't completed.
So basically, we're updating that. So now we can go back and look and say, how are our streets performing? If you look at a PCI curve on particular sections of street, you know, when it's brand new, it starts out at 100. Then it lasts, and then it starts dropping down. And then you do a surface treatment to it, and it brings it back up some, and then it starts that gradual decline again. So what we're gonna do with this information is, one, see how our streets are performing. Two, see how streets have degraded over time. And basically look at this again and set out our plan from now moving forward. So we can forecast out in longer years, see what works, see what doesn't. Is what we're doing effective? Is it not effective? What can we change? So there's a lot of information that would give us. The other thing that this inventory is going to do is now inventory all the curb and give the curb a condition. Because as we go through this program, we see that our curb's only addressed in mill and overlay streets. We don't do anything with curb with chip seal. So we need to inventory that, see what we have, and know what kind of condition it's in, because curb degrades just like the streets do. So we need to see how our curbs performing, where are we lacking, where do we need to focus. It just basically gives us an idea of it gives us a direction ahead.
Right.
With all these studies that we have done from 2008 on, do we have any, is this going to help us to incorporate the residential into the major thoroughfares that we've done? And do we have any firm numbers on our liability at this point? I mean, we've done a lot of studies on our roads. Spent a lot of money on these studies.
Yes, so I think a couple of things. So last year we started looking at, after we got through core sampling, we started assigning some costs to those streets, which were originally identified in the 2011 program, when we first rolled out the street maintenance program, as being mill and overlay.
Right.
We know they can't support mill and overlay, so that means they've had no treatment since in the time that we had expected to touch them. And depending, I think we were looking at estimates somewhere between 7 million and 11 million of the streets that we have core sampled and done the geotechnical work on. And so part of our conversations has been, how do we start to take a bite out of that apple and get those worked into the program. This updated PCI rating, what we've also talked about is, in order to get there, we're probably going to need to, we could potentially be looking at expanding a seal treatment program and making it larger to touch streets that we know we're not going to get to now, or the time with which we're going to get there is going to be a little bit longer. So this updated rating then sort of reshuffles that deck and allows us to reprioritize based on the work that we've done for the last 5 years, and really helps us kind of set and identify the highest priorities and the highest needs, so we can be spending those dollars most effectively going forward.
That, I think, would be real helpful to the next council for sure, because it's just overwhelming.
When was the last time we did an analysis in terms of how much traffic we're generating throughout the city? I mean, as we continue building, infrastructure-wise and businesses along, I mean, obviously we're attracting more people. What is the traffic flow right now in terms of traffic generation?
As far as traffic counts, we've done traffic counts for Johnson Drive. We did that study last year. Beyond that, we kind of rely on Ames data for our traffic counts. You can get on Ames and pull up, it'll kind of show you the ADT for different routes.
Ames updates what, every 10 years?
I believe so. And a lot of those traffic counts, some are 2007, some are 2011. They're kind of scattered about. So they're not all the same vintage. They're all a little bit different. But if there are traffic studies done, like say Olson does the traffic study for Johnson Drive, those are really easy to add in Ames and kind of keep that side updated so we can use that as a reference.
Any other questions here?
Well, it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's the first portion of, is the inventory and condition update. The second item I want to touch on is ADA improvements. We got a request last fall for ADA ramps to be installed along Roland Drive. There's a gentleman that lives up on Rock Creek Lane who uses that route to navigate. He is in a wheelchair, and right now there are not ADA ramps along Roland Drive. So his route is from Rock Creek Lane down Roland Drive, past Wendy's and down the trail. Currently, he goes down the street.
That would be a priority, you would think.
Yes. So when we get requests like that, we want to make sure that we roll it into our street program and address those concerns as they come up.
Are there any other areas that we are missing or limited on our ADA compliance relative to access points?
Not every area, just who's in a wheelchair.
You know, it's a difficult task to start with an area that was never took this into consideration. So basically what we're doing is with our street program, with our mill and overlays, we address those ramps as we go. Of course, Johnson Drive, had all the ramps installed with it. In the street program with the mill and overlays last year on Reeds and Woodson, we installed ramps while we were there doing that work. So that's kind of how we keep up on that.
But that's kind of in your back pocket. Whenever we're doing street updates, you've got.
That is something that we definitely look at. And especially if we get a request. We want to make sure that if someone has an issue, that we address it as soon as possible. So that is going to be a part of this year's project. The third one is we are going to continue the use of chip seal. We are still in the process of really trying to fine tune exactly how we put chip seal down. Some places it takes very, very well. Higher traffic areas, 51st Street, for example, took really, really well. Time of year affects it some. You want it to be hot when you put that stuff down so it beds in and you don't have a lot of the shedding issues.
51st Street it took?
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking about 51st between Fox?
No.
And Lamar, okay.
Lamar and, no.
Oh,
Reed's on the other hand.
Reed's is horrible stuff.
Right. And we are not only talking internally about that, but externally. When
Shoot
you,
out of it. Yeah.
we've talked to Lenexa, we've talked to Overland Park, they kind of see the same issues, especially when you get into a street that's relatively flat, such as Reed's. Takes a lot of sweeping. Flat, low amount of traffic.
I know you guys have been out on that street a lot, I know.
Right.
You've been working around with those residents, but
From one point to one point
Fifth-
of Reeds, all the way south.
51st to 50th.
51st and 53rd, that's street 11, I literally, every time I turn in my driveway, just turning in your driveway, if you pause, you're kicking up rock all behind you still. And it's piled all at the end of the street, all on the curbs. You just walk along and you're kicking rocks all over the place.
I was just running down Portland the other day, and I'm like, I can't even run this far from the curb because there's so much gravel. I had to run in the street. There was just a significant. There's just gravel. You can just tell.
And John's gone down, he said the guys come down probably at least 3 times with the sweeper.
Right.
And it just piles all down there. And I know you got a call from one of the residents.
Right.
And it's bad.
Right. So it's really a fine line.
By the way, if we do it again, we'll get about more calls than what you got from that one. So we got to figure out a plan B for that.
Right. We tread on this fine line of shot rate. Shot rate means how much oil gets put down and how much rock gets put on top of it. Contractors tend to run on the heavy side when it comes to the rock because they don't want any oil bleeding through.
The oils and that.
Because if the oil bleeds through, it ends up on people's tires, they're tracking it everywhere, they're getting it on their car. Actually happened in South Overland Park with their project last year, and they were out power washing driveways, paying detail bills, and so on. We've looked at, we use our air sweeper. Brent got to the point where he was a little afraid that it was a little bit too aggressive for that. He goes, I'm almost worried that the down pressure of the broom is kicking up more stuff than it's picking up. So we've talked to the contractor, and basically they're responsible for 2 sweepings. We're looking at a potential third if the second sweeping doesn't
The
take
pressure
care of.
from the brooms is kicking up.
There's a lot of
Causing it
down.
to be released.
There's a lot of down pressure on.
So is theirs gonna be different than ours is?
They use a mechanical sweeper.
Okay.
Which is a little bit different than ours. So we're gonna kind of take that into consideration and see if that doesn't help pick up the bulk of that better than our air sweeper does. Our air sweeper kind of fine tunes it.
Is it worse?
Brent was just worried about being over aggressive with it, I think.
And I was hopeful that when the plows went down,
Yeah.
basically anything that was still on there would just,
The biggest problem we had this year
I
is
think that
that
actually made it worse too.
there wasn't a whole lot of
There wasn't
plowing.
enough, yeah, exactly.
I mean, there was a lot of treating going on, but not a lot of plowing.
So this is really helpful to our roads to do anyway? Or do we need to just do it the roads that aren't just so flat? Or,
Your options for seal are twofold. You have chip seal and you have slurry seal. The
Chip seal
perform-
lasts longer though, right?
a lot longer.
But I wonder if on some of those streets like Reed's an example, that's on that flat part, maybe we do have to do a slurry on that, and then you have to look at the street. But that makes weird streets in it, it's like some look this way, some look that way. I get trying to create universal, but if we're gonna keep spending this money and our streets end up looking like that,
Right.
that's not good either.
that doesn't sound effective?
Slurry, we did slurry a couple years in the beginning of the program. The results.
You did slurry on Johnson Drive, right, from Lamar to Metcalf, or Broadmoor?
Yeah. And then 58th Street, from Johnson Drive to Barkley was a micro seal. And then we did slurry seal on say 58th Street from Lamar heading east. A couple other locations. And as we monitor those, they don't perform. They don't hold up. And then you end up in 2 or 3 years back in the same exact position that you've been in.
So this is the best we can do right now?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
And I think we need to, as a public works department, we need to focus on the back end of it. If we need to sweep it mechanically again, we'll do it. If we need to get guys out there with blowers blowing it out to the middle so the, sweeper can come by and make sure that it's in the path, in the right path, and the curb line, we need to fine tune that at the end. I would tend to side with the contractor on the shot rate thing. I'd rather it be a little bit too heavy and us have to spend a little more time on dealing with extra rock than dealing with tracking oil. That
By the
would
way,
be,
Yeah.
it was heavy.
yeah,
I mean,
it would be a disaster
I get that.
to deal with the oil part. I'm not saying that they couldn't tone it down some, which,
The amount that was at the ends of the streets that was piled, you were turning through, was
Mhm.
almost like it was snow. I'm like, am I turning onto a full gravel road? It was bad.
well, and that's something that we're constantly trying to fine tune.
It's not you, it's them, it's the contaminant. I imagine they shouldn't have left it like that, but.
So that's something that we're definitely aware of, and we really want to focus hard on. Because like I say, I believe that chip seal is the best application as far as seal programs go. As far as, cost wise and maintenance and how long it lasts.
Well, John, I appreciate you saying that you guys want to more proactively manage it on the back end. If you don't know the better product, and I agree with you on slurry seal, I mean, I don't think it's very attractive, it's not very uniform, it doesn't sound like it's very effective. And, you know, a big part of it is educating the folks that, you know, are on those streets, and if we can be more aggressive on the back end, maybe get a third sweeping from the contractors, and just knowing that we're gonna have some additional costs. And look, we're not talking endless miles. This is a manageable project summer to summer. We just have to plan for it so we can get the right people against it. So, but until a better solution presents itself, I don't know why we, I mean, look, I've gotten all the same emails. If I wanted to drive on a gravel road, I would have moved to the country and all that, right?
Right.
So it's not perfect, it can, but it sounds like it can be improved, especially as it relates to the excess. So.
Absolutely. And that there are a couple of other technologies that they're coming out with. One is called UBAS, which stands for ultra thin bonded asphalt surface. Basically what they do, they come in, profile the road, which is basically a 3/8 inch mill, and then they put 3/8 inch of more asphalt type material down. They've done it on like Knoll from 67th down towards Overland Park. Overland Park's used it in a lot of places, and Leewood's currently they're using it in long straight stretches.
So they did it on Knoll, and that was, I thought that was chip seal, that's some kind of, because I felt like we kicked up a lot of stuff, but now you can't even tell it was done.
It's called UBAS.
Okay.
So they've got it on these long runs now. Contractors are looking for a way to bring it to residential routes to where they can go around corners, do cul-de-sacs, stuff like that. So that's a potential technology that we can look into once they kind of fine tune that, and maybe looking at something like that.
Any insight you can share this with us, just when we're thinking the contractor's gonna come back around, whenever we get that worked out for another, that's just good information to share with the residents on the street.
Sure.
That just confirms with them, we are staying on it.
Right.
So you can share that with us as far as when you think that might be happening in some of the streets.
Absolutely. The final thing I wanted to talk about was we'd like to continue the geotechnical reports. We found that gets us a lot of good information, so we don't end up in the same position that we ended up at the beginning of the program, where we mill something off and we don't have anything there. Moving forward, we've got ourselves far enough out that we'll be doing the 5th year out every year. That way it matches up with our CIP. So we can continue to forecast that and know what challenges we have ahead of us so we can adjust the program accordingly. If you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
Well, I do have one. I know you said it was a final point, but you make one other additional point in your memo. And we've got about 10 residents with us from Kennett Place this evening, including your Homes Association President, Pat, is with us. I don't know, I'm assuming all of you know where Kennett Place is, but it's this kind of unbelievable oasis over in Ward 4 at the corner of Shawnee Mission Parkway and Lamar. And you have some pretty bright, involved residents that are over there. And if you've read the letters over the years between Mr. Redmond and Sylvester Powell, there have been some commitments by the city to help, not with snow removal, but with maintenance of the streets. There's streets through there, there's some that are in need of attention, and I know that there's been an ongoing conversation. So if I could, Pat, I'd love to, just get an update on where that conversation is too. And since we have so many guests from Kennett Place, I'd love to have Pat have an opportunity to address the committee, if that'd be okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Absolutely, and I was gonna take that one,
Oh,
so
excuse
that's
me.
okay, no, not a problem.
Jumped out of order.
I've got that one, but if you wanna talk just briefly about Lenex's piggyback kind of cooperative.
Yes, on the chip seal contract. Lenexa lets their bid every year. What Steve Mustaine has done is he has wrote into the contract that the prices that Lenexa gets are available to other cities in the county. So
Nice.
what it basically is a piggyback program on Lenexa's program.
With their quantity, they get a better,
They do. Basically, last year, we were paying $1.98 per square yard for chip seal. We would pay $1.80 per square yard for chip seal, and our square yardage is usually around 40,000. So it ends up being a pretty good chunk. Roland Park's taking advantage of the program. Talked to Trey, who is now in Edgerton. Edgerton will be taking advantage of that program also. But I think that it is a fantastic thing that Steve has done. And we are considering taking advantage of that contract also.
What happens there on the scheduling? Does Nexa have anything to do with that, or?
No, we basically work with the contractor, who is Harbor, who has done the program the last 2 years.
Okay.
with the savings, can we accelerate anything?
Potentially. You can accelerate things. You can probably bump your square yardage up some. I'm gonna talk with Bob Harbor, and with us and Roland Park being so close together, they wanted to do both of ours at the same time, and do some mobilization of materials and stuff like that to try to work with them a little bit on price and quantity. So.
Cool.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to address the other one now?
If you don't mind, do you mind if I go? Pat and I become very familiar. Okay. So I think we were approached back in 2014 by Kennett Place Homes Association about resurfacing or maintenance of their streets in that subdivision. And there was a letter that was written back in 1994 to the then president from the mayor, which none of us sitting here at City Hall at this time were aware of. Not only is that letter, but as we did our research back then, there was actually a unanimous vote of the City Council back in March of 1994, sort of affirming that letter and that commitment that was made. And as Councilmember Shepherd talked about, it did not include snow removal or significant, full depth reconstruction, but it just talked more about that intermediate maintenance piece. So as we started that conversation, and I think we've had some conversations in both 14 and 15 around this council table about what to look at. One of the things that we did last year was we included streets in Kennett Place in our geotechnical, our core sampling program, wanting to have an understanding of what was the next most appropriate treatment. And I skipped a step. Back in 2004, the city did go in, kind of in conformance with that agreement and that commitment, and did what we believe is a seal treatment. Martha was digging around in the attic today, and we can't find any specific reference to streets. There wasn't as much detail kept back then, but that treatment was performed back in 2004. So the core samples that came back in last year's program suggest that their streets would not support a mill and overlay treatment. So the next time they do a major treatment, they would need to be looking at a full depth reconstruction. So the streets in Kennett Place are private streets. Oftentimes in a private street, the city doesn't have any responsibility for maintenance. We did some research, which I also shared with the Homes Association and other communities. We talked with Lenexa and Leewood and Shawnee, looking at other communities that had either gated communities or subdivisions that were where the streets were private, and what were their maintenance agreements and arrangements, and it was all over the board. So everything from sort of handshake agreements to we do nothing to if we accept those streets and they become public streets, we require that Homes Association to bring those streets up to current day standards. So really no best practice in the metropolitan area from what our research would indicate. We also talked with them, and I have shared with them, if they were to look at a full depth reconstruction, we've talked about special benefit districts and what would that look like. Very rough ballparks at this point, but it would probably be over a 20-year period, about $1,000 per household in Kennett Place to accomplish.
Over 20 years or $1,000 per year?
$1,000 per year for over 20 years to accomplish that full depth reconstruction. And I know they've been talking about, what happens private and public. The only other private streets that we have currently in the city of Mission are in Lincolnshire, which is up off of 51st Street, just west of Lamar. In Lincolnshire, we don't do street maintenance, but we have historically plowed those streets. So Kennett Place and Lincolnshire Townhome Development are really the two spots in town where we have private streets that are run. Kennett Place has historically and always been responsible for the snow removal in their subdivision. So in the packet was the request from the Homes Association to consider a seal treatment in the 2016 street program. I think we've estimated that that would be somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 to accomplish the seal in that neighborhood. So at that point, I'll stop, and then if the Homes Association had anything they would like to add, then we can kind of talk about what options.
Can I just ask a question real quick? So in Lincolnshire, have we ever done any kind of mill and overlay or full depth replace? We've done nothing from a maintenance perspective on those streets.
Not since we've had this comprehensive street program, no.
Ever, just ever.
I don't. The
Not
records
since
aren't-
I've been here.
The records aren't good enough for us. I mean, they would authorize a street program, and there would be no list of streets that were included in that program. So, I don't know.
And so I just want to really clearly, the geotechnical
Yes.
study said it will not withstand, there's no reason to do a chip seal or seal and over. It has to be mill, has to be full.
It could take a chip seal treatment, and a chip seal treatment would probably extend the pavement's useful life for another 5 to 8 years. It could not support a mill and overlay treatment.
Got it. It would be full depth construction. Right.
Correct.
So,
Okay. We understand that there is some question about what was done back in 2004, and your records, our records probably aren't much better than yours, but we aren't quite sure whether it was mill and overlay or whether there was substantially more building than that. The fact is, we have gone forward now for 12 years with nothing further done by the City of Mission, and we have spent, due to the fact that we were reinstituting the relationship, so to speak, with the city and having those discussions to get up to where we could talk about reality here, we have spent about $7,500 on patching of our streets in order to maintain until we could get to where we could determine what could be done about resurfacing. We have paid and still do pay for any and all snow removal and all of that kind of thing. We don't have sidewalks per se. Of course, we have curbs and we have storm drains, but we don't have sidewalks that have anything to do with like your ADA type gates or any of that sort of thing. As we stressed in the letter, we are taxpayers in the City of Mission, and I think we've outlined pretty well what we think we get for our taxes. One of the things that I did not put in the letter because I wanted to bring it to your attention, we have spent about $300,000 on upgrading our homes to perfect condition over the last 4 years. And while the housing market has bounced back since '08, part of the reason for the increase in tax dollars from Kennett Place is because our property tax assessments have gone up over the past 2 years. So counting the property tax mill levy that you increased last year and our increase in the assessed value of our homes, you're getting considerably more dollars in the City of Mission through property taxes than you ever had before. And we're only asking what we think might be equitable as taxpayers in Mission, even though we have the private streets. Our community was constructed in such a manner, as you can see, along the left corner side of your screen up here. We have a strong main street with a small traffic circle on the northwest corner. And there are some small cross streets, all of which are dead end. We don't have any cut through, and all the addresses are Kennett Place. So it isn't like we have a whole ton of mileage there to deal with. We're dealing with a very short mileage situation. And we're simply asking if you will do the resurfacing for us and we help us do what needs to be done going forward. Do I have any questions?
What's the occupancy at Kennett Place?
36 homes. There are probably 59 or 60 actual individuals who live there, because there's couples and a few individuals and so forth, 36 homes.
So this letter from 1994 said that the city would handle the potholes and stuff like that, but you guys went ahead and did that on your end. You didn't come to the city and ask. You said, I thought you said you spent
We've spent about
$7,500.
$7,500 in the last 2 years doing patching to keep the surface usable, so to speak, until we could get complete resurfacing of some type.
We have dedicated, how much of the increase in mills to streets?
7. So the 7 mil increase that replaced the TUF is all going into the street program.
It's just replacing what was our, I mean, it's a one for
It's
one.
one for
It's
one.
not additional.
But I
And,
might,
and
I'm sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say, I mean, everybody's houses have increased in value from a property tax perspective. I mean, everybody's appraisal, I mean, it's in Johnson County in general, including all Northeast Johnson County cities, they all increased in value. So I appreciate your comment. Your area didn't just increase, everybody's area.
Well, we understand that. We understand that. Ours has increased substantially, of course. I could use my own residence, I suppose, as an example. In 2015, the tax assessment valuation went up $16,000 on my personal residence.
Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't mean anything to me without you giving me a percentage. I mean, I know, I mean, it could be 3%.
I understand. It went up another $4,000 on the assessment notice that I just got. So we're looking at, I don't know the exact percentage, but those percentages are significant in the value of our homes. And that means you're getting more money than ever from our development.
The other thing I might add, and I'm not very biased on this because I'm a big fan of Kent Place, is that they're very light users of our services as well. Very light users. And so, big property values, they pay big tax bills, and they use very little from the city. You know, it would seem to me that if we could figure out some sort of an equitable solution, if this, you know, overlay or chip seal that's on the table were to buy those streets another 5 to 7 years, what that might buy is 5 to 7 years worth of planning. Because the long-term solution obviously is going to be a full depth reconstruction. And I think as Laura has set out, that's not what the 1994 letter between Mr. Redmond and Mayor Powell talked about. And sure, I understand we can draw hard lines, but I think from a reasonableness, fairness, kind of an equitable standpoint, working with Pat and the residents of Kennett Place to see if we can be of assistance. And then maybe part of this assistance is outlining what the future looks like. Because again, full depth reconstruction, you know, that bill is going to come due for Kennett Place at some point.
It's going to be expensive,
But
yes.
if we can give them, the time to plan for that. And
I agree.
Put them on the street program.
We had,
Is the 10 to 12,000 you quoted, is that giving them the 5 to 7 year stretch?
Yes.
Well, and the other thing we might tell you, we, of course, like everybody else, have budget considerations, and the 5 to 7 or 8 years would certainly give us time to accumulate reserves. We are right at this point in time doing a first ever professional calculation of capital reserve needs going forward 30 years. So we're going to be knowing what we need to do in terms of accumulating, knowing what we need to do in terms of spending on all the different assets, including the streets and so on. So I think we would understand where you're going, because that would tie in with where we're going.
Well, we have a commitment there that we made back in 1994 that I think we do need to honor. And we just talked about saving 10% or something on our chip seal program.
$4,000.
Okay, which is going to be enough to pay for almost half of the job that you're talking about. I think it's something we definitely should consider. Let's look at some hard numbers on it.
The other thing that I would just add in here is, I think if we're gonna take some responsibility for, I think it's either kind of from a year-over-year maintenance perspective, I think you need to consider like being all in, right? So if we're gonna be responsible for this chip seal, this overlay, whatever, then we should be responsible for looking at curves, we should be responsible for potholes, because those things come into play. If those things are not done well, you know, I mean, then that just has a, you know, a cumulative effect over time, right? So, I mean, I think I would just recommend that it's very clear and outlined, very specifically who's responsible for what.
Yeah,
You know what I
that's a
mean?
good
And
idea.
it just
I mean,
curbs.
potholes, I would say yes, I don't know about curbs, that's a.
Well, I think.
Well, it's in here, it talks about potholes and curbs and overlay.
I think we would recommend doing the PCI condition of the curbs, the sidewalks. They don't have sidewalks, but that we were just discussing before, because we did not do a PCI inventory of Kennett Place streets back in 2008 because the streets were private. We would recommend getting that full picture as we do a part of that program that John was discussing earlier. It gives us that data, but I also think that, you know, we're going to suggest that as we go through that process, that we get a very clear and very specific policy drafted for the city on
Yes.
the maintenance of private streets.
We have an
Yeah.
official agreement,
General
and
practice.
then also probably an official agreement with the homeowners association with each affected community.
Because this will impact Lincolnshire too
Yep.
as well, right?
Well, you know, they'll be coming to the door just as well.
Right.
Oh. Yeah, I like that.
Clarity is a great gift.
And I do have to say, I mean, I feel like we've had some very good conversations over the last 18 months.
We've
And
been very clear and very straightforward with you.
yes,
And,
and I hope we've been the same.
well, of course, what more do you need from us? What can we do to help you move forward? What's the next procedure?
Yeah, what's our next step?
Well, if you want, right now, the streets in Kennett Place are not included on the list of streets to be bid with the 2016 program.
I need to put those in there and get hard numbers.
There you go.
Yeah, you get an estimate, let's just figure out what it is, what we're talking
Something
about.
concrete.
How much is it gonna cost to do that?
10 to 12,000. I mean, that's rough figures.
Just to do the piece, no, how much
He
is?
he can do that.
Oh,
To
yeah,
do what?
To do the study and figure out how much it's gonna cost.
Oh, I can do that.
Okay,
Because
okay.
I've got Lenexa's numbers.
Right, but we didn't do the PCI. So we're just, we don't need to do a PCI for this, we're just gonna go, we'll just put it on the plan for PCI in the future.
Yep.
So
And
does
the
the,
geothermal.
so does the street plan come back then in May?
The action item for the street program will come back in May.
Yes.
Okay, and at that time, you'll be prepared to share the numbers with the new city council on what it would be to include Kennett Place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely.
What the available budget is,
Correct.
as well as kind of all these other conversations about
Yep.
a clear policy, a clear agreement, clarity moving forward, whether potholes moving forward are included, all those things.
And that's why we always like to have the discussion item first.
Sure.
Because, I mean, with the street program, you kind of have all these things floating out there that you want to wrap your head around, and then we take those from the discussion item, bring them all together,
Right.
package them up.
So I'm with you, just for some of our guests that aren't regular attenders.
Sure.
Maybe they perceive this to be an action item.
Oh,
So
yeah.
tonight is the discussion, and then next month will be the action, and then it will be ratified in the
By the council.
by the city council, or considered by the city council.
Correct.
So we'll discuss it again in the beginning, well, they'll discuss it again in the beginning of May, and then it'll potentially come up further.
And the good news is, your three new city council folks are in attendance this evening. They have been listening attentively, and so you won't have to bring anybody up to speak.
Very good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Great
Thank you.
overview, great overview.
Thank you.
And I do want to say, I don't know if you read the letter, and I'm sure everyone in Kennett Place has the same sense of humor, but if you read the end of Robert Redmond III's letter on March 4th, 94, to Sil Powell, he said, "I'm pleased to know that the citizens of Mission have demonstrated the good judgment to maintain you in office during my absence. I have to question your judgment, though, in enduring the anguish of public office so long." Best regards, Robert Redmond. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll do the community for all ages discussion here. Emily, could we drag you down here?
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Emily.
You're welcome.
We just brought
Right now.
Just brunch.
Yeah.
We are fantabulously bronze, we are bronze, we're not just
We
bronze.
took our silver and
So all of you are familiar, but maybe to some of our guests, the Communities for All Ages program is a regional program we are participating in. We were one of 4 pilot communities that started this work in the region, and the goal is to just keep the demographic changes that are coming our way and that are already here in some regards,
front and center as we do our daily work, and as we offer city services to our residents to make sure that we are offering the services in the best possible way for the largest number of people. And so we're talking about age, but also ability, inclusiveness comes into play, all kinds of things across really all elements of what we do. We received, the program is set up so that cities can apply for recognition status in April each year. We did that last April and received bronze recognition. That was just mostly for our work in preparing the checklist that is now a ready-to-go tool for other communities, and then some awareness activities we did with our task force and staff. The second level is silver, and that is the assessment phase. I submitted our application for silver level recognition April 1st. That represents work done by our Sustainability Commission and by staff, taking that checklist, that tool, and walking through and kind of giving Mission a grade or an assessment for each of those subject areas and each kind of task and policy within them. We took it a step further than what was required because we like extra
That's how we are.
credit. So staff especially has been working on prioritizing within that assessment some really key cross-departmental projects that we can tackle in 2016 as part of, especially the department head, but every kind of all staff as a part of our work plans for 2016. So we're still finalizing what best those are and some of the details of what they'll look like. But I'm personally really excited about the cross-departmental aspect of it. We can kind of check each other and keep each other honest in achieving these goals. It's a great chance to just break down some silos and work together on some real tangible things that will be visible by the community. So it sounds exciting from where we sit, and we've heard that our application looks good. So cross your fingers, everybody.
And that cross-departmental
I think it's a sure
activity
thing.
will also, there'll be also opportunities for the council if you're interested in. One of the things that we want to do is go out and actually do some kind of boots on the ground surveying inventory of our public facilities, parks, sidewalks, some of those other kinds of things as we look at that. And so we'll certainly invite you on the days when our teams are out.
So
looking at those things.
you're saying we're pretty much a shoe-in on the silver award?
Yep. Now we're going for gold.
And now we're going for
Yep.
the gold.
So, and I mean, also to bring your attention one more time to the fact that the agenda items now include that Communities for All
I was
Ages.
gonna just
impact.
point that out. I
Yeah,
think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, it's silly, but doing this actually, you know, having to think through it and articulate it as a staff person, preparing it all for you, and then having that be in the public record, and then having it just, you know, you just have to stop and think. So it's a really great idea and a great pause to sort of remind us why we're doing what we're doing. and
So
who we're doing it
just for
for.
clarification, Emily, for instance, we now have the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Farmer's market garners people from all across the city and beyond.
Yeah.
They come in. Would one of the components that supports the Community for All Ages be the degree or latitude that we have with that market? Like, we are not just gearing towards seniors, we've got all ages covered by the kinds of food we have, the kind of produce, a
Yeah.
variety of things. It would be the degree that we are inclusive within the community, would it not?
Yes, and so you offer a farmer's market, but you look at the physical way people arrive at your market. So that pulls in the transportation. You look at the access to food, and that brings in the health. You talk about how you're marketing and who you're marketing to, and that brings the inclusivity piece. So as many different populations as you're reaching, whether that's physical ability, age, or ethnicity, or a variety of other things. It's kind of all in the mix. So. And that's the kind of thing, you take any kind of effort that we do and then you try to just expand the circle.
Good, good.
That's awesome.
Good.
Good job, Emily.
Yeah.
So thanks for your support. Do you want to do this now or?
Yep, no, go ahead now.
So I have these posters courtesy of Springboard Creative. So we have exciting news, maybe you've heard, but Main Street Credit Union agreed to be our presenting sponsor for the market. So we're looking forward to working with them.
Can you pass those around?
Yes. Thank you. And take several, you can have them or put them on your fridge or whatever you want to do, tell your friends. We'll have a ton more. I mean, this is just the first print really of them. But we haven't done our sort of paper city effort yet. But we did think we would do a food truck kickoff party the week of the market. We haven't really had kind of a food truck.
Oh, so it's not the day of the market?
No, that is Tuesday evening, May 3rd. from 4:30 to 7:30. The idea being kind of just to have a party was the idea, but also food trucks and fun, but to bring a different population kind of down to the market location to really show off, especially during the week, for people who may not be here always on Saturdays, kind of different time, different day. This is where we'll be. We'll be right
So
here.
hopefully
So you
some of
come-
the businesses, hopefully you're going to like the businesses and saying, hey, by
Yes,
the way,
yeah,
like
the
your
worker
regular-
community, yeah. Well, so, and I don't know if you all saw, but last Wednesday, we posted the flyer and we announced the event on Facebook. And overnight, 80 people said they're coming. And the sharing and the interest and the like visibility on the Facebook page, it's over 1,000 now, I believe.
Do we have an
Really
Instagram page?
exciting.
Yes, we do, for the market, we do.
Okay.
Yep. And so that was just one effort, one click got us that. So, I mean, it's clear that food trucks are really kind of the thing now and everybody's excited. And the bar will be hosting a drinks tent and we have 5 trucks at least. We're going to ask the trucks what they think about bringing more people in, given the interest we've seen. Live music, we'll have games and drawings. And also chances for people to sign up for market alerts and email communications so we can keep them in the fold. And we're inviting our vendors to come down so you can meet your vendor, kind of in a casual way. They're not going to sell,
They won't
just to
sell.
be there.
So
But
do you have?
will the brand new Mission food truck be there, the Mission Market?
Talk to Kevin Fullerton about that. I didn't know we had one of those, but we sure have a logo.
If it's raining, do we have?
Rain or
Do we
Rain or
have
shine.
something put up though?
We will have tents around certain
Tents.
aspects of things. I mean, the trucks will do it no matter what, and then the bar tent will be covered, and our information tents will be covered, but bring your ponchos.
Where, yeah, where in the
And will you be putting a list out when you want us to volunteer?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And that list is available now, so if any of you are interested in being an ambassador during the week of the market, we would love to have you.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Thank you.
Good job, Emily, good news.
And are you clear for volunteers for that day too?
We
So
could,
you
yeah,
got that all
yeah.
covered?
No, we really good, so that would be great. Yeah, we haven't outlined kind of job duties, but we'll be down there. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ellen. Anybody have anything else that they would, nobody?
I do.
Councilman.
Nobody?
You got something?
I'm not a nobody yet.
Mail her.
Okay.
She's gonna keep coming.
So this is something that I have been vocal about over the past like 8 or 9 months, and is the fact that when we look at the East Gateway and what could transpire if the developer did not need city funding, what is proposed could be built today.
True.
And we have I think I've spoken to several of you, and I think at the end of the day, the thought was never, I think at the end of the day, it was shocking, or maybe people didn't really realize that, whoa, wait a minute, that could have been built if we didn't need any city money, if you didn't need city funding, and we don't really think that type of a development, some of us don't think that type of development really fits in with the city. So it was just interesting, because in our Ward 2 meeting this week, or last week, Prior Mayor McConwell came to the meeting, and she actually said that the vision for the East Gateway was an afterthought and wasn't really thought out, and it was just kind of put together at the last minute, right?
Right.
I mean, that's a fair representation, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. So I know I'm leaving. I just am using this opportunity to encourage those of you who are on the council and remaining, and those of you who are going to be new to the council, to be thoughtful and think about what the safeguards or protections or policies or form-based code or whatever you might call it that should be considered to be put into place to ensure we have the correct ambiance in our city, the correct look and feel for what we want in our city. And as I said at the ward meeting, and Ward McConnell laughed, because I was a very vocal proponent or opponent to form-based code when I first came on this council. But in talking with Pete Heaven and understanding how his organization works with other cities, cities do have the ability to think and be thoughtful about what they want in their city, and have the ability to say, no, we don't want that, or we don't want it to look like a standard McDonald's, we want it to be a different, like in Cape Cod, they look like houses, you would never know it's a McDonald's. Kentucky Fried Chicken, I mean, we have the opportunity to go to these people and say, we want.
Right, ordinances that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think at this point in time is to take the opportunity, the community has been extremely vocal the most vocal in the most recent election about what they don't want to see down there. And I think that this is just an opportunity in conjunction with,
What were they saying they didn't want to see down there?
they're not supportive of the current development.
How do you change
But they
the
didn't say
mixed-use
what they
code
didn't
on
want to
a
see or-
developer at this point?
Oh, well, I mean, you can't,
Okay.
you have to, I mean, I'm not asking you to not change something that's not within the legal parameters, but who knows what's gonna happen, but in the meantime, I mean, if we don't enter into an agreement with him, and then that development does not happen, like, we don't give him money, and it's dead in the water, that's the opportunity. So what I'm asking is, this council to start thinking about along the way, so that they can put an action in place when it makes sense, instead of having to start from scratch, and then all of a sudden we have another development agreement, okay, now we can't do anything because now we're tied to this preliminary agreement type thing, right?
Amy, I think you're exactly right. There is, the way the MXD zoning is written right now, in my opinion, and I don't mean to create work for others that are gonna still be around this table, staff or elected, but the way it's currently written creates confusion at best and chaos in other ways, right? And, and so one of the benefits of having all these conversations with Ron Appletoff when he decided to step up was it was approximately 10 years ago when Ron stepped down and I was appointed to his seat. And so I've had the last 10 years. He was here prior to that. He was right in the middle of when all of that all those ordinances were redone, right? And I can tell you this, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but the way it's written and the way it's interpreted, and the intent of those that wrote it, I think are at cross purposes with one another. So for the sanity of the community, for the fairness to a developer when he or she comes through the door, I agree with you. We owe it to this community to get it right and to make sure it is spelled out, and not just it's clear, but it also includes all the constituents that are made up of, including the development committee or community, because what we don't want to do is set guidelines and goalposts that are unattainable.
Right.
And
You want to be
discourage
prohibitive,
development.
absolutely not be prohibitive.
Exactly.
Listen, Amy, I agree 100% with you.
So in the last 10 years, you haven't brought this up or discussed it or
I thought
or
that,
tried to make these changes?
that's why the mixed-use code was
Before?
put in place in the first
That was
place.
before.
That was
Yeah.
10 years
ago.
Since you got it.
You're right, and Pat, I think that for the first, call it
Well,
7.
I'm just saying,
No,
now that
for
you're
the-
getting ready to leave, you're.
Right, but
Because
I'm
we've
just
been
saying,
through-
but my answer to
this
you
is
is this,
third
is that
time.
if you're asking a serious question, is that
Yeah.
for the first 7 years, if you look at the 2 development agreements that came before us, it was a home
Completely
run. It
different.
was
Sure.
a
Oh, yeah.
bullseye for what it is we wanted that development to be, and it has only been within
I totally agree
Plan
with you on
3
that.
and Plan 4. In Plan 3, we started staring off into the edge, but we said even though there's this giant footprint, we have the density on top that it met the spirit. And it wasn't unanimous, so we still weren't all on the same pages related to the MXD
Right.
zoning. But I think what has been really exposed with this 4th plan is that you can read it, and I can read it, and she can read it, and we can come to 3 different conclusions, and
You're right.
those aren't ordinances that are well written.
I agree.
I think, just as you guys had the commentary there, I think the thing is as you echoed that timeline, if we would have done, the beginning of that 10-year journey, or even prior to that, put those in codes, that would have been our guiding principle through any of those developments, no matter what they were. So whether it was this or some other option, the vision guideline would have been very clear and definitive,
Right.
so there wouldn't have been
The
confusion.
confusion that we have right now.
And
So it's time that should be well spent now.
Right, yeah, and I think that, to Dave's point, and when you look at the timeline, is regardless, there was no need to dig into the nitty gritty and really pull back the covers and fully understand exactly what that zoning was, because everybody the majority was on board with what the proposed development agreement the development was for that area. Everybody had a level of comfort with that. And now that's not happening. And now it's I don't want to use the word deteriorate, but that was what came to my mind. To me, the biggest thing for me is at the end of the day, I feel like this community has had a very loud voice that they do not want any retailer over 50,000 square feet. And there were significant efforts made 10 years ago that this city said that will not happen. and for whatever you want to call it, an interpretation of the zoning down there to allow for a 150,000 plus square foot retailer to go in that spot, I just think at the end of the day, that's.
2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't that kind of outcry. I didn't hear all that.
Right, and I tried
Which had
So I tried-
exact
Some
same
people
footprints.
did have, I voted against it because people in the community weren't
Okay, I'm
supportive
saying
of
not to
it.
the same degree that you're
Because
talking
to
about.
the
It's
point, there was
changed dynamically.
there were other things that people were probably willing, but again, at the end of the day, when you take all that other stuff away and it becomes the largest piece of that space comparatively to when you add everything else in, people don't want it. And so I think people have been very vocal that they do not want 150,000 square foot retail space.
And let me be even more specific, because it's the only use that the MXD zoning addresses. It's not 150,000 square foot whatever, it's 150,000 square foot, or 50,000 square foot discount superstore.
Yeah.
We were very intentional about discount superstore for a reason, and it's like I said, maybe it was the wrong vote when I approved the third plan because we had the density over the top of it. I'm sure Laura's ready for this conversation to be over with. But all I'm saying is, that's where we started to steer into the gray area
Right.
of what is the interpretation of this, because that was the first plan, Pat, that actually introduced a discount superstore.
Yeah.
You with me? And we
You're
got,
right.
and we got
And,
comfortable with it.
My confusion with you was your support before, and.
And it had everything to do with density,
Right,
over the top of it, right?
right.
But more importantly,
And again, that, and I thought I had
On that
that
building.
latitude to make that interpretation, and I think Amy's point is exactly right. We, at this stage, shouldn't be arguing about what the ground rules are. We should know what the ground rules are, and then evaluate each plan that comes forward and say, and using our planning commission and that whole process to determine whether or not it meets it, right?
Right.
but I think your point is actually more important. So separate Gateway from it.
Right.
Put that completely aside, because what you're saying is
Any-
any development. So
Right.
let's not get hung up on Gateway right now, because that's a whole, we could spend hours here.
Right.
But taking the time as a city
Right.
to establish these guidelines
Right.
will help any piece of development the council looks at doing. That's the important thing.
You're right, but the important thing too is along with that, there are some pieces that have very robust and specific development. You know what I mean? So you can prioritize. I just think that is the largest
Sure,
undeveloped
I
part of
agree,
our
I agree.
city, right? That is probably has the most immediate.
But I think if we take the time to have those guardrails in line, every development gets cleaned up and looked at under a different lens,
Yeah.
because you have clarity across each one of those components.
Sure.
You can
Well,
apply them to Gateway,
that's
you can apply them to redevelopment of a gas station.
Right.
They're all.
That's the form-based codes, Jason, versus the mixed use. Those are the only two we have, right?
Well, and I'm happy that the conversation happened, because in fact, Pete and I have been talking for months about this exact thing, and how to come back and make sure that our ordinances, in fact, are saying. And some of that is history. You go through the evolution of developments, and you learn some lessons about what works,
Sure.
what doesn't, what you don't want. And so, both on the form-based code side, I mean, I will tell you, form-based code, we've turned 3 developers away in the last month who wanted to build a fast food restaurant at the old Valero station. And didn't meet with the form-based code, and so we didn't bring, none of those projects, come to you, and so and the development community is gonna tell you, because they've been telling us for the last 6 months, you should just get rid of all of these kinds of restrictions and just let us do whatever we wanna do, which is, but, I've gone back and in the last month and a half reread the form-based code, and more importantly than looking at it absolutely on a block-by-block basis, have gone back to what were the principles, what were the goals, what were the objectives. Let's look at the history that we've had and our experience with developers, and then let's talk about what that means for our future, and if we need to make changes to reflect that, or are we still on the right path? Or are our codes getting the kind of development that we want to see in our city? And I think that's in the East Gateway as well.
And so what I would just say is, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's concerning to me that we've turned around 3 separate opportunities to develop that property, because that is prime real estate, and that's an excellent opportunity for revenue generation. What I would tell you is I am absolutely really not interested in another fast
I was
food,
gonna say,
another
food's not one of mine.
food place, you know what I mean? But
Nice restaurant maybe.
Unless it's a
Right.
Mexican restaurant.
no, since we don't have enough.
We need not one of those.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I mean, I think you're exactly right. We have to find the right balance. We have to talk to the developer community. We have to know and understand what is out there, but we need to make sure we know who's wagging the dog's tail, right? The tail doesn't need to wag the dog, but we need to do it within.
Well, and what we've done though, historically, is, we have the form-based code, the mixed use code. They come to us, it goes through the planning commission, they come to us, they say it either passed or it didn't, or like Keystone, we had to vote because there was an exemption, it met only 80%.
Right.
So, as long as we're passing it, usually if it passes the
It's a good
planning and
point.
zoning committee, because they clear it, and it goes through Pete Heaven, and it's according to our rules that we have set down.
Right now.
And it's.
But we're talking about,
Jennifer
those
makes
need to evolve.
If you want to
Jason
change
and I have
them,
had the
fine,
exact
change
same
them.
conversation
But
about what you two brought up. Exactly, we need to clarify that, it has to be spelled out, and if you want.
Right, for everyone's benefit.
Everybody's.
Right.
And Jennifer makes a good point. I think it is, you always have the ability to relax your rules, right?
Right.
You never have the ability to strengthen them when it comes to decision time, right? So just like the Dave Christie development, Jennifer's exactly right. We said, you know what? You're right, it doesn't really meet 100% of the form-based code, but if we say no to this, it meets 80% of it, we'll allow some, allowances, and we all got comfortable with the development. But you can never
Right,
strengthen
can't
it.
go
So I think
that
that's a really
way.
good point, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like I've spoken about this many times. I feel like there are people on the council who were supportive of it, and I felt like there was no action being taken. So I would just encourage this council to make it a priority in the next 12 months, that some action be taken and they really look at this
And we'll just say in defense of staff and anyone else who, because I'm in full agreement with you, but awfully difficult to do this exercise while the bullets are flying,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Right.
But we are in the
Well, yeah.
middle of planning commission 1.0, 2.0, coming back. I mean, that, go all the way back to October, and we've been having this conversation about this current version.
Yeah, and I'm not, so what I would just say is going forward, probably just for staff in general, it would be nice to let your council members know that, hey, I've heard you and we're thinking about it, but here's where it's at, because to be frank, I mean, I felt like it fell on deaf ears. And it was very, very, very frustrating. So that's just probably just for me personally, it would be great. I totally get, that's a great point, you know what I mean? I get that. It just would be nice to know that that was kind of what was all kind of going on in play.
Well, I think the most interesting thing that was said was that Laura McConwell, was that your?
The second time she showed up, the first time she showed up, her and Bill Nichols.
Where's
almost
Prairie
like
Bill
went
Post
close.
when you need?
No.
Yes.
No.
Right? Were you there? And I was like, this is out of control. How do I stop this?
Oh, you just got, these are highlights.
Well, we're gonna actually one party, you guys.
Yeah.
Look at something coming up.
Thank you, is
All
that?
right, that's
is that
it. Anybody have anything else on the other? Then I
Thank
call
you.
this meeting closed.
Matt, you
and-
got it started late, but you finished strong.
I can't
But
tell.
RC, you're not gonna smoke it,
I'm
aren't
not
you?
gonna do all this.
Yeah.
There you go.
Keep it rolling,
You
all right?
go.
All right.
We're done.
We have this really, really, really important item for Brian to talk about.
Oh, I'm so glad we made you wait all this time.
We're spending a lot of time on this.
I say bring it to the consent.
Oh, good.
Jennifer, I
Let's
tried
do
to
it.
support that.
Thank you.
All right, flip to that one.
He's gonna give you the presentation.
Kept it in front of me, just.
Next item on our agenda is our budget calendar. The seasons of life continue. So we're wrapping up our audit. We're now getting into our budget process.
We
already did that.
took it
Yeah.
to, we're taking
We
it to
already did
council.
that.
Consent, that was our consent.
We'll go on.
Thank you, RC.
You were not messing around.
It was quick.
So we have a calendar that we put into your packet, a proposed calendar. And, as you all know, August 25th is D-Day for us. That's the day we have to get the budget into the county clerk. So we develop our calendar working back from that date. We put in there our last available time to have a public hearing. Kind of back that up a little bit so we give ourselves some time. We're going to meet that, we have the second public hearing, or go back and make some changes after the first public hearing. So this is kind of the proposed calendar we're looking at, really wanting to start the entire process after the new city council is seated, give them a little bit of time, get their feet wet before we jump right into it. We'll start off on May 4th with our auditor who will be here to present the findings of the audit. We'll jump right into the reviewing of budget priorities and doing forecasting information. We'll come back on the 11th of May with our community investment program for stormwater, parks, and streets. And then in June, we'll talk about our general fund budget and supplemental requests from department directors. And on the 22nd, we'll have our continued budget review at the work session. And in July, we'll have a series of public meetings and public hearing. Kind of to Emily's point about community for all ages, we try to make every attempt that we can to get the word out about our budget process, try to be as inclusive as we can. So this is already on the website, but we'll decide this again when dates come up.
Maybe it could be one of the things that float across the screen, like budget season starting.
Sky letters.
Yeah.
You want to add, Laura?
Could it be any easier?
You guys made it so easy last year. They'll really like
We
your
are,
information.
it looks like they have moved
I'm not gonna say a word.
the property tax lid implementation date up, so it looks like we.
Oh.
The bill last year made it effective January 1st of 2018. Compromise bill that looks like it's going to pass this year has moved that up to January of 2017. So this will be our last budget cycle before we would have to take a potential millennium increase for voters.
We're gonna raise, this is the year to do it, folks.
We just did
Let's
it.
not raise, we raised a ton last
We just
year,
did
but
it.
we raised it double, so we would, or we did go everything.
Any questions?
We're good. Are you running this committee?
No, but can I ask for some questions?
Man.
All right. So next.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Thank you. So very quickly, we've had, in the last year or so, we've been approached by a couple of groups in particular about doing runs of some sort in the city of Mission. And we have a special event policy that sort of outlines what happens in runs are included in that. But one of the things that our policy doesn't address is, it has an application fee of $50, but it doesn't talk about these groups covering the costs associated with barricades and public works and police. And in particular, we've been approached for one, which is a mile run, which would effectively shut down all of Johnson.
Oh, no.
Which,
So
so
it's 6 a.m., right?
Come on, guys.
Yes.
6 a.m. to 7 a.m., right?
So
We have trails.
what we would like to, and we spent a year with them looking at alternate routes and suggesting things, and they're pretty adamant. And so, you know, what we've taken a step back and what we really like to do is put together a policy and bring it back to you next month, which just says and we've looked at Liberty, Olathe, Kansas City, Missouri, Lenexa, a lot of surrounding communities. It's very common to share those costs, to have those groups pay the costs for police and public works. So we'd like to make some changes to our policy that would give us, our special event application right now also just asks the group to go out and see if there are any objections by residents or business owners. We'd like that process to be handled in-house by us and to look at things like access for emergency vehicles and riding. So we'd like to just tighten up our policy, bring you back some recommendations next month, and then be able to, any group who approaches us, say, here's our policy, if you can conform, we'll estimate some costs, and if you want to abide by our rules, great. And what we'd like to do, I think, is on the 5K in particular, we'd like to maybe pick one or two routes that are, so we know we can firm up the cost and we can do,
That's a great
and say,
idea.
if you want to have a 5K.
Here are the routes you can pick in our city.
Exactly.
Would that be applicable to a motorcycle ride that's going to be?
No, you're good. You're good.
So I think our policies are pretty
Pictures of
good
that
for things that happen in parks and on private property, which is essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, except for the part where
We just like to
Drive on the street.
We'd like to firm it up a little bit. and
You're
bring
good,
that
don't
back.
matter.
So we get input from both the chief and from our director of public works.
So how many groups have we required?
We've had 2 so far. One wants to do a 5K and the other one wants to do kind of a smile.
Should look at the revenue
It's
generation.
a
Yeah.
And the city used to do a 5K. Suzie and the chamber, I think, had a sunflower run for years. But,
Wins the race.
I remember that, I never participated.
That's awesome.
yep, so what,
I miss the cow drives, you know, something.
I do too.
There's just no cattle to drive.
Cow drive, yeah, Dawson Drive.
Facebook is.
We done?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I do have one more question.
There she goes.
No, so I was trying to find where I could walk on the trails in the city. And is there a map of all of our trails? Because I Googled
Generally,
it.
it's just on the top of it.
I don't think there is a map of all our.
Yeah, so that might be something good to put on the website, because, you know, I was specifically looking for the one that was over by, the apartments, you know, where the $1 Million Trail was gonna be. Like, how do I get over there? And then, like, I don't know how to get there. Do I go into that
You go into the
park?
park.
Streamway Park, is that what it's called? And is it safe?
Thanks.
Will I get a tab?
Okay, no, that's a great question. The other thing I just wanted to hand out, we've had some questions, some complaints, and it's, people are out, it's time to walk again, so we're gonna gear up and do some pedestrian enforcement on Johnson Drive ahead of the market, just increase awareness. So, we've already had some increased police presence down there based on complaints, but we're really gonna kind of hit it hard over through the end of this month. The message boards will go up, but they won't go up until the 13th of April because they will be up prior to that, announcing the move of the all-electric house from Shawnee to its new home at the old King Louis. So the old electric house has been part of the Johnson County Museum. They're literally putting it on a trailer and moving it. And it will come through at Metcalf and Shawnee Mission Parkway.
Oh, that's those signs are already up, are they? No, not yet.
Not yet. But that move is gonna happen on the evening of the 12th of April. So our message boards will be taken up, and then as soon as we get done with that, we'll flip them over and notify people about pedestrian enforcement.
So hard.
And then we'll give you an update kind of on those efforts and what we found at our meeting.
Is there still consideration to lowering the speed limit on Johnson Drive?
Talk about it again. Sure.
Sounds like a good discussion.
What speed limit do you want there, Pat?
Get back
It's
on.
30 now.
You want it lower?
But I thought we had some very good information that did not substantiate that.
We did, we had some very good information.
Oh, wait, I do have
Sweet
one
spot.
more thing. Can we get rid of all the stop signs on 57th Street? Like, make them yield signs or something. Every single street has a stop. I'm looking at you, it's not your fault, but oh gosh, please.
Is it 57?
You're just supposed to drive down the other ones and just turn
Between
on the
Lamar and
block you want
Dawn?
to drive.
Yes,
Yeah.
every single street has a stop sign.
Yeah.
That's consistency, hallmark of excellence.
It's the only street in our city that's like that, I would wager.
Isn't 56 the same way?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
57 is special.
56 has like half, maybe because John Weber lives here.
You just all went around.
Yes, they went near where, just
I love
a quick
that.
trip that they're rebuilding on the other side of Metcalf. And a little bit past there was a rebath.
Oh, they've
They've
done
gone
there.
into that space.
Okay, and why did they do that?
All weather
All weather
windows,
windows,
yeah.
Do you know why?
My understanding was is that
I don't know.
Is it sunny day?
Well, if you know the parties, it might be.
Did it have to do with the driveway
the
test?
story that we heard was that it had to, in some respects, had to do with better loading docks and some of their product, but.
Where did they move to?
They moved right over to, there was a
By the
rebath.
hot dog place.
Where there used to be, the New York Dog Pound, which I think is now closed. It's just Johnny Mission Parkway, past where they're rebuilding the Quick Trip, there was a rebath, kind of
Oh,
sat back
yeah.
out there. And in fact, they've got all their awnings and they were taking
Well,
down.
thank you, I just wondered.
So it's basically
And
that.
Calmax expanding.
Space is available.
Yeah, and primo spot too.
We'll get any other new businesses in
Little
town?
Mexican restaurant.
Oh, God. Please not.
Little fast food.
Salsa girl across then.
Okay.
Anything else? Other?
No, thank you.
If you need anything, I'll be in New Mexico.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Have
Don't
fun.
rub it in.
We're gonna go see George O'Keefe
our daughter.
Very nice.
It's great.
We'll do all work, Dave.
Springtime.
We should have told him not to knock on that
That's not what he called it. Oh, fine, but you call it. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Well,
I'm telling you, 10 years and then you do.
Dr. Carla, she's been married to me for 18 years.
I think she likes it though. Okay. I'm ready, I'm ready. Hold on a second. Okay, oh, I guess we got it, Brad. Is that where we want to take it?
I waited till anybody.
He's the kid, he's only 4 times. Thank you, that's what exactly like.
Not the other street, and it was like a reconfigure requirement, and I didn't do it, so I was gonna. And Chris got to watch them, and then, see, now I don't know why this is, like, is there really anything going on?
Yes, you were still broadcasting. You did not shut down the server.
So even though I closed the other one?
Yeah, so just closing that doesn't do it. You need to shut it down.
So you didn't, so this is recording?
You are still on. Yes. That is what that green one says.
So I leave this page?
Do not leave it.
So what can I do?
You need to reopen this.
Oh, okay. Well, that's tricky. Weird. Yes. He's holding. I gotta figure out my thing. It's kind of all around.
It actually just needs it for my.
Okay.